So, we're back from a 2-week break to start off the second core of My Hero Academia Season 7, starting off with a banger of an episode with the potential defeat of All For One and the obliteration of Bakugo. Yeah, we're going to talk about it more right now. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my breakdown and review of the most recent episode of My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia for Season 7, Episode 10. And there's a lot that we have to cover in this episode, from a few additions to a few changes to just how well this anime and this episode is being adapted by Bones this season. So, let's just dive right into it and really talk about the episode as a whole. And to start off, episode 10 covers roughly around 5 chapters. It covers the second half of chapter 355 from pages 9 to 15, as well as it covers chapters 356, 357, 358, and 359 from pages 1 to 13. And the title of this episode, Wounded Hero, Burning Bright and True, actually derives from manga chapter 357 of the same name. And with a new core of anime comes a brand new OP. And while I won't dive a lot into the actual OP in this breakdown, I may make a separate breakdown of the OP itself, because there's a lot of spoilers to what's to come, not just in this season, but in the manga of My Hero Academia to come, with a lot of references from stuff that we've only seen recently in the manga. But going from there, the episode begins properly, where we get to see Jiro calling out to All For One after the massive attack that she took from that cannon, and is pretty much telling him off by saying that she doesn't care about what is going on in the situation. All that matters is that All For One hurt Deku and Aoyama, her friends, as she lets out a attack, heartbeats around Legato. And we have All For One commenting on the fact that this attack is weak, yet he is unable to retaliate at this moment due to the fact that the vestiges inside of him are beginning to react to that, quote, weakness. Which is very interesting, and I'll talk about this soon, but there is a heavy implication with this scene that is very much different between the anime and the manga. But going from there, Hawks does reveal that his plan was to attack the same spot on All For One's mask to eventually break it, which he does with the help of both Tokoyami and Jiro. And what is very interesting about this moment is that in comparison to the manga does show All For One show some kind of fear against the attack that is landed on him by Tokoyami. But what is different between the anime and the manga is that the anime adds this very much purplish blackish hue over All For One, and how this color shift is more prominent in the anime than it was in the manga, but they both give the idea and the implication that All For One in this moment is feeling fear from Tokoyami's attack, and that fear will translate over to other characters such as Endeavor, but this is all foreshadowing a literal big moment for Tokoyami to come, most likely in the season. And to tie back around to what we saw with the vestiges, we get an actual change between the anime and the manga when it comes to All For One's explanation of what's happening in this moment. How he believes that the retaliation of the quirks is definitely not due to the interactions of Jiro, due to the fact that he has multiple different infrared and sensory quirks after his fight with All Might. But the difference comes from the implication for why the vestiges inside of All For One are revolting. In the manga, the implication is that because All For One has a copy of All For One, that his strength over the quirks has weakened. While in the anime, the implication is that because everything, including All For One and the quirks themselves, are copied, that is what is the major reasoning for why his hold on the quirks are weakening. And I think with both explanations, they work very well, but if we tackle the explanation in the anime, the implication is very much the idea that All For One right now has all the quirks that he had in the original All For One, and that it is not just a direct copy of the quirk itself, but everything else that was a part of the quirk. Which means that the implication is that All For One didn't get the base version of his quirk and then continue to add on to it with different quirks, but that he just got a complete copy of All For One with everything that was included in the original. And I think I may kind of like the explanation of the anime better than what we got in the manga. But yeah, that is a significant change between the anime and the manga, and I'm kind of glad they made that change. But going off things that weren't changed, we get to see that All For One, after this attack, was able to rebuild his mask while sending out a massive attack that could have potentially killed the heroes of Hawks, Jiro, and Tokoyami, but luckily they were saved by Endeavor himself as he seemingly loses his right arm. And this is something that is very different from what we got within the manga, where the manga implies that the spike actually was able to cut through Endeavor's arm in that moment. However, the anime implies that it did not rip through the arm itself, but actually tore it off. While the manga cuts off his arm, the anime shows it as being torn off. And frankly, I think it's a little bit more gruesome in the anime because it's a lot harder to rip off a limb than it is to just cut it off completely. But even with that moment, we see that Endeavor begins to land an attack on All For One as we get a flashback that implies that the flashback is happening during that moment he saves the other heroes of Hawks, Jiro, and Tokoyami, and right when he's about to attack All For One. And pretty much what this flashback is just really getting to understand why Endeavor is the way that he is and getting into his backstory, how he lost his father, how he came up with his hero name, and how we get to see that he burns his old younger self to smithereens, as the entire point of this flashback is to show that Endeavor's weakness and cursing that weakness is the only thing that has kept him alive this entire time, and that's the reason why he's able to survive in this moment. And I will like to add that there is a slight addition to the anime where we get to see Endeavor burning his younger self, but we see the flames take on a similar look of Endeavor's current facial hair being made of flames. That was not in the manga, but I like the addition to it because it directly ties the younger Endeavor to his older self right now. But as we've gotten that scene, we also get implications that Endeavor in this moment was able to cauterize his wounds as he lands a massive attack on All For One, back to back. And how we have one scene in particular where we get to see the purplish aura again, which All For One calls back to his fight with All Might, showing that Endeavor is instilling the same kind of fear that All Might did in their initial confrontation. And we once again continue to see Endeavor just being a beast. We get to see a whole lot of great animation sequences which uses very strategic cuts and perspective shifts with the use of smooth action animation and nice sequences. And the scene of all of this that I like the most is the scene where All For One's mask is completely broken. He tries to steal Endeavor's quirk, but Endeavor just shoots out laser fire eye beams to burn off his hands, preventing him from using his quirk. And overall, this sequence is just animated pretty much to perfection and build up to the ending of Endeavor going up against All For One. Because as we see Endeavor deliver the final blow on All For One after seeing the purple aura once again, indicating that All For One is feeling fear of the potential death that is coming from Endeavor, we see Endeavor begin to reflect on his life, reflect on what he's doing, and how he's doing this to build a better future for the students, for Shoto, for the rest of Class 1A. And as we see this happening, we see Endeavor delivering the final blow with a lot more animation and action that was not seen in the manga of him grabbing onto All For One and using his prominence burn, with the anime adding reaction shots just to emphasize how dangerous and how powerful and bright this attack actually is, able to halt the fighting of all of the heroes and villains on the ground. And seemingly, as All For One seems to be defeated in this moment, we get sort of a crackling, different kind of voice coming from All For One in this moment, alluding to the idea that All For One is not dead and that he's potentially being revived thanks to the help of potentially Ares' rewind quirk bullets. And what is interesting about this part of the episode is that as we cut to the title screen, something is actually missing from this scene, but is hinted to be added within the next episode. And that is a scene from the manga where Deku senses, with the help of Yoichi, what's going on with All For One as some flying individuals are coming in his direction. Later on, it's revealed who those individuals are, but this is kind of set up to what's to come. And most likely that setup is removed because the setup is eventually revealed a few chapters after what we're getting in both this episode and the next episode. So there's no real reason to build it up now, or at least we'll build it up within the next episode where we're going to get a more impactful moment with Bakugo and his relationship with Deku. And speaking of Bakugo, he appears in this episode as we cut over to the fight with Tomura, with a lot of the CGI fingers and added action sequences prior, really emphasizing how well this scene is actually animated even with the CGI, and just showing how much action is actually compacted in these episodes and in these scenes of the heroes going up against these fingers. And as we see this happening, Tomura gives a monologue to the heroes, which is very interesting due to the implications of what's happening in this moment of All For One and Tomura Shigaraki switching voices, or more specifically speaking patterns in the speech, where you can kind of indicate where All For One begins and when Tomura ends, but is a lot clearer in the manga than it is in the anime. At least I was unable to notice in the anime, but noticed it more clearly in the manga. And I bring this up due to the moment of Bakugo not knowing if Tomura or All For One is talking in this moment. However, this leads into the reveal of Bakugo's new weapon, which he uses to completely fire and nearly obliterate all of the fingers surrounding Tomura in this moment. As we get another chunk of character development for Bakugo, as we see that when it comes to Tomura's speech about what it means to be a hero and how he can help the heroes end up on equal ground, and that the world is filled with like misunderstandings, misrepresentations, and judgment and all of the like, Bakugo is thinking to himself about how he understands that, and that he is pretty much proof of what Tomura or All For One is saying in this moment as being very much incorrect, because he understands and was a part of the system that All For One was speaking of, but the difference is he learned from it, he grew from it, and he bettered himself, showing that what All For One is potentially saying in this moment is not true, and that truth is seen through Bakugo. As we see that through his truth and through his attacks, he's able to land a massive attack on All For One with a new move, Howitzer Impact Cluster. As we do not see the initial impact of the attack right now, but as we cut over to the 3rd years from the business course, showing their support, as we do get some of the individuals of the support course questioning why they're recording it, as the business course explains that their entire 3 years is there to support the heroes, and that this is their best way of doing it, showing the history so that it could be learned from other individuals, and that how they and all of them are doing this and acting as heroes. And I like this scene a lot because it just shows how being a hero is not about just fighting the bad guy, but also being support and lifting the heroes up as well, showing that they are all heroes in their own special ways. Speaking of heroes and their special ways, we cut back over to sort of a revamp of what we saw earlier of Bakugo firing off his Howitzer Impact Cluster, but we see the actual impact and we see how the explosion is able to very much encompass Tomura in this moment, and we see the entire full force of the explosion nearly exploding the entirety of the flying coffin. But because Bakugo is very smart, he was able to mitigate the damage to not harm both the structure itself and the people around him, which is something that Kaminari comments about. This is how Bakugo is, which ties into the moment where we see that unfortunately the attack did not finish off Tomura, because Tomura was able to in that moment grab onto Bakugo's arm and crush it, showing that he's no longer interested in Bakugo again, while fending off the heroes coming his way, using some more excess fingers to attack them with a force comparable to All Might himself. And as the episode ends, we have this Tomura individual walking towards Bakugo, telling him that the only thing that he's interested in is the relationship that he has with Deku, as the episode ends with Deku coming towards the location potentially of Tomura, and potentially where the cutscene will be added in the next episode. And from there, we do get also another new ending. And I would say that this ending is a little bit less impactful than the ending that we got for the first part of season 7. However, it's still a very decent ending, and I very like some of the visuals being a little bit more simplistic and having a little bit more symbolic value than you may look at with your first viewing. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this episode. Once again, another fantastically animated episode that very much does the main core material justice by adding on to it and changing it in a way that can change the perspective of the viewer viewing it versus the viewer reading the manga. Overall, still enjoying My Hero Academia moving forward, and the next episode will probably be just as good, if not better, if I think what we're going to be animated is going to happen. But yeah, let me ask you this. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And was there anything that I missed in the episode that you spotted yourself? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!